3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
All right, this is GrokTALK. Welcome back. It is Saturday, March 14th, 2015, and this is GrokTALK, brought to you by GrokTALK.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. Thank you very much. Mike Rogers, of course, here. Skip Murphy. Thanks to Jane Cormier, who's still here but stepped out to take a call, or to make a call. And we want to thank Jane and Guy and Susan, who were on earlier today. And coming up, hopefully, Dennis Michael Lynch, if we manage to connect on the phone. Dr. Jeffrey Singer will be joining us to talk about electronic health records. Mark Meckler, co-founder of Tea Party Patriots, will be with us. And hopefully, if he gets off the plane before we have to go off the air, Senator Ted Cruz. So we are still waiting for the phone call, and we're just going to have to fill in the meantime, because that's just how things go. So, Mike, talk.
Well, okay.
I know you have plenty to say.
Yeah, I was working on my little post here about the hapless, hopeless Carter abroad of the NHGOP. That is to say, Fungus Cullen, who still thinks he represents us, and still thinks that the party faithful want moderates who will work with Democrats, even after 2010's election and 2014's election, where the voters stood up and screamed, "Stop the agenda, stop Obama's agenda, stop the spending." And lo and behold, our folks get to Washington, and all but a brave few just buckle under and go along. And and the folks like Cullen, who don't get it, say Ted Cruz is everything that's wrong with the NHGOP. With the GOP in Washington, because he says hell no and he obstructs stuff. Well, the founders designed government to be difficult. They wanted stuff to be obstructed. They wanted states' interests to be represented, which most senators don't do a very good job of. And Cruz is a breath of fresh air in D.C., and which is why we are looking forward to talking to him later, because he says hell no and he means it. He
did at the Iowa Ag Summit a week or two ago. They asked him about the renewable fuel standard, and he says he doesn't like it. He opposes it, and he explained why.
Which compare that with the others who go there and pander. Bush, even Walker, went there and said he saw no need to repeal those in the near future. It'd be too disruptive. Yeah, too disruptive to all the agri-business that's built their business model on getting government money.
Well, yeah, and I think Cruz prefaced it or framed it very well. He said he wasn't just saying he thinks this is an intrusive federal government thing, and he also thinks that all the other regulations that the federal government has placed on the agricultural industry and farmers in general, they need to go too. And of course, everybody's like, yes.
Yeah, we want to free you up to farm. We want to get rid of the subsidies, but we also want to get rid of the suffocating regulations. We want you to be free to do what you do best, which is to feed the country and the world.
Well, we may have had some crossed wires or lost a confirmation because we haven't gotten our phone call. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who are potential guests or future guests on our program, we like to call you. That way we know our 10 o'clock is your 10 o'clock. So we don't know where Dennis Michael Lynch might be. He could be on the West Coast. He could be anywhere. And so it's entirely possible that we just aren't going to get that phone call. But we might still. In the meantime, excuse me. Oh,
well, I've got a WTF moment of the day. So talk of the week. And just tagging in on what Mike was talking about with the regulations. As we all know, Seattle decided that a $15 minimum wage was supposed to be de rigueur, and that company owners would have to either love it or lump it, but they were stuck with it. Well, now the owners are starting to say, we don't love it, and we're not going to lump it either. Seattle eateries closing as $15 minimum wage approaches. The minimum wage law goes into effect, and I'm reading from Hot Air here, on April 1st, 2015. As that date approaches, restaurants across the city are making the financial decision to close shop. The closings have occurred across the city from the Grub in upscale Queen Anne Hill neighborhood to Little Uncle in grittier Pioneer Square to the Boat Street Cafe on Western Ave, and so forth and so on.
Are they relocating outside the city, or are they just closing?
They're just closing, and the couple of things here that's not surprising considering that 36% of a restaurant's earnings go to paying labor costs.
For those of you who are not familiar with the restaurant business, labor is typically your first or second highest expense in your operating budget.
Yeah, only succeeded by government, where labor costs, having been on my town's budget committee, is usually between 60 and 65% of the cost of running your municipality or higher level.
Which is absolutely absurd.
Anyway, so what we are finding is, as a result of liberalism's interference in food, just like Michelle's interference in schools, what you're finding is that the restaurant business in Seattle is getting hollowed out, along with the stomachs of the people living there.
Yeah,
they won't be able to find a good meal.
Washington Restaurant Association Anthony Anton puts it this way: it's not a political problem, it's a math problem, which is kind of goes back to our discussion with Jane just a few minutes ago. If you get them to really think about things, a lot of the stuff that they want you to emote about instead coming to stark relief. And we're seeing that here, where the emotion said, well, we need to pay our poorer people more, just like Donna Susi said basically in that post I put up last night about New Hampshire's minimum wage and the lack thereof. They want to basically push the responsibility of the state. If we're going to have a welfare state, let the state do the welfare is really what it comes down to.
Seattle's going to have more welfare because all those people are going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, well, another pull quote here. Welcome to the land of the $17 cheeseburger. As you can figure out fairly quickly, everything else will be more expensive too, which of course ends the purchasing power of that $15 wage. More importantly, if you work for one of those establishments that is closing, your wage is $15 times 0 hours, isn't it?
And how many times have we said that? How many times have
you
brought that up?
Exactly. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about minimum wages or whether you're talking about unrealistic pension and benefit agreements. At some point, if you insist on getting 100% of what you want, the entity that you're bargaining with will go under, and you will get 100% of nothing.
And the story continues, or the post continues on, talking about some of the places that are turning into more robotic entities. Steve, you and I, Mike and I put up the hamburger robot. You've talked about the kiosks. We've all talked about this stuff. This is what's going to happen.
And let's be honest. I have to be clear here. The company I work for actually sells a computer that could be used as a kiosk in a restaurant because it is clean room compatible.
And it's ruggedized, which means it'll be hard for the frustrated diners to do any damage.
Poke all the little buttons, and it's got a great big screen, 15 inches.
One of the favorite places that the most esteemed wife wants to go to is...
And I don't want that to be the replacement.
Yeah.
No.
That's what the economics are, because the progressives who say, well, you have to pay the poor people more. Well, unfortunately, when you've got really thin margins, that's just the way it's going to be. So what happens is that, when we go to Burrito Me, as I said, the most esteemed wife's favorite fairly fast food place to go.
Burritos.
Yeah. All they're doing is taking the order on an iPad connected to Square for payment. And frankly, I could sit there and punch that just as easily as anybody else, so that's not a problem. And Mike, I'm not being rude. I'm just looking at our Ed Lasky flasher here.
No, I could see that. Steve was carefully positioning the flasher to be right in Skip's eyes, so that if Dennis Michael Lynch should remember to call us. Should we read out the number, Skip? That's probably a good idea. 603.
Good question. I'm not sure where I've got it.
Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to look it up because I have it stored because I phone it in fairly often.
Yeah, basically it's a case of I could punch all that stuff. McDonald's, Burger King, all those larger entities are coming up with those. The only person you have to interact with is somebody who brings the food out from the back of the house and says, "Here you are, thank you very much," and then toodles off and goes off and does something else.
Well,
The human interaction is kept to a minimum, and the big companies like, say, a Ruby Tuesdays or an Applebee's or that kind of place can afford that kind of technological rollout. But you come to a mom and pop type place that can't afford that, they're doing in Seattle.
You're either going to get a $15 artisan burger, or you're going to get nothing at all, because there's no choice in between.
I'm not paying for a $15 burger. It's not going to happen.
The other thing I think you're going to see is an increase in family firms, and you bet they're most likely going to be Lebanese family firms. Because they do.
Why Lebanese?
Because they do this kind of thing very well. The whole family gets into a business far more than Americans do.
Well, but I think you will see that change.
I think you will see that change. But the reason why I think you'll see family businesses is because you can probably get around some of the regs over exactly how much you pay if you're pooling it as a family. But also, if you employ family members, you can basically say, we're going to pay ourselves this much, and we're going to charge artisan prices for the food, and you can take it or you can drive 50 miles. Because
the progressives are not going to allow that. We've already seen that with the family farms, where they wanted to reclassify the kids who would normally do a lot of the work on the
as chores.
Chores. They're saying, no, they are employees. You have to pay them. And it doesn't work that way. They're also eliminated from doing a lot of the stuff that would normally be considered chores. 12, 13-year-olds driving the tractors around or the trucks and what have you. The progressives say, no, you can't do that anymore because we have to protect the children. It's obvious that you disgusting farmers don't care about your children. Right. We have to care about them more. So you get that.
They care enough about their children to want to preserve the farm as a business for the next generation instead of having it go under due to government regulations.
Yeah, the no farms, no food bumper sticker toting, Prius driving leftists need to realize there's a connection. Well, they can't because nothing's connected to them, but that there is a connection between that child who was conceived and allowed to be born must be able to drive the tractor so that one day they can run the farm.
Right. So, Steve, got excellent squirrel for you. So I saw a Prius yesterday, and you said nothing's connected. Well, in the liberal mind, the dots do not connect, and here's proof. The license plate read, abbreviated, sun-powered. It was a Prius, a freaking Prius, which gets half of its power from squashed dinosaurs and the other half from coal-fired power stations.
Which is compressed dinosaurs.
in
one form or another.
Yeah, well, the other one half is compressed plants.
One's liquid and one's solid.
Yeah, but maybe
to get into the finer points.
To get into the finer point, yeah.
Things that were allowed to live.
That's why I always chuckle when I drive past a Sinclair gas station in the Midwest whose emblem is a dinosaur. For those that have traveled, yes, because you're powered by squashed dinosaurs. It's tremendous. Dennis Michael Lynch, if you are listening, our line 1 number, the one with the Lasky flasher and Skip's face, is 603-715-9689.
That was the number we gave him. See, once again, to reiterate.
And for anybody else who wants to call in and interrupt our squirrel-like thinking processes, that's the number for you to call and get our attention.
Well, they need line 2.
Well, there is another number. That is 715-9690.
Which I need to write down. Thank you.
Bye, Jane.
But that only flashes a little LED, so...
Well, we need to... I will get in touch with the... public relations person who organized this little phone meet and greet, because I do want to have him on. I mean, the guy's probably going to try to run for president, and he's going to want to come to New Hampshire, and if he wants to talk to the grassroots, he needs to talk to us, and that's how that works. So you don't want to go to Fergus Cullen's house.
No,
okay? You don't want to go there.
That's not going to work.
If you want the grassroots to completely ignore the candidate, invite them to Fergus Cullen's house. This is just what you would do, okay?
Yeah.
When Fergus Cullen didn't have to say anything about Ted Cruz. Didn't have to say a word. When he invited Jeb Bush to his house, it sent a message to everybody in the grassroots, all the conservatives, all the libertarians, all the independents who vote like Republicans, that guy...
This is not the candidate
you're looking for. Is not the guy you're looking for. Okay? So thank you, Fungus Cullen.
This is not the droid you're looking for. It's an iPhone.
It's an iPhone, exactly. And this is an LG. I don't have a droid. It's an Android phone. It has software in it that's Android, which I like just fine. But yeah, so that's not it. We're going to take, well, maybe we're not. I don't know if I'm queued up yet. I am queued up. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Maybe our guest will call us.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
Rock Talk.
Nice music, and you're on camera.
I am. Hi. Welcome to GrokTALK. Brought to you by GrokTALK.com with Coalition of Taxpayers, blah, 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 blah. Please check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and follow us by all means, because we do put other things up there besides just the stuff we post that automatically goes to Facebook, GrokTALK.com. We were expecting Dennis Michael Lynch, but he's somewhere in the world, and we don't know where, and I don't have his number. So hopefully Mr. Lynch will get in touch with us, and we'll reschedule that. Very happy to do that anytime. He's produced a number of documentaries on illegal immigration. Talk about that real quickly. Let's see where They Come to America was the first one. Circa 2012, he did They Come to America 2. Again, he spends a lot of time talking about this issue. If you search Dennis Michael Lynch, you go to his website, you'll see a lot of articles about illegal immigration and the social and political and cultural impacts. So, we wanted to have that chat, and we're not going to be able to have it today, but I appreciate the opportunity to have almost had him on. So this does happen, and there's not much we can do about it. But hopefully we'll be able to connect to Dr. Jeffrey Singer. We have his number, Mark Meckler from Tea Party Patriots. And, of course, Ted Cruz is calling us because they don't know us well enough to give us his number yet. So maybe we'll get that over the weekend, and we'll get into the trust category, Yep. And we'll move on from there. So you were making an excellent point during our very brief break, and we were talking again still about farms and farming and wages, and let's continue that conversation. And the death tax.
Yeah, the death tax was what I wanted to bring up, the estate tax as it's formerly known. I mean, these same people who are driving the Priuses and want to drive up the wages and tell farmers that their kids can't do the chores around the farm necessary to make it a viable entity are also generally those who want a high estate tax, which means if Farmer Brown wants to die off, wants to leave the farm to the kids, pretty much the estate tax is going to take 60, 70, 80%, especially once you get beyond a small farm stand type farm or a truck farm, you're getting into a real commercial operation. They can go millions of dollars just in land value alone.
Just as an example for people to put it in perspective, I mean, this obviously when Steinbrenner died, the owner of the Yankees, he died before the new death tax took effect. Had he died a couple weeks later, his family, who has lived with him and worked with him and put up with him building an empire and owning a very, very successful sports franchise worth billions of dollars probably in merchandise. Yeah. If he had died a couple of weeks later, even his army of lawyers would have had a really hard time not having to sell his team to pay the taxes because his family wouldn't have the assets outside of that. That's absurd. It's ridiculous.
It is. So let's, there were actually rumors.
And I don't like the Yankees, but still, he has a right.
He has a right to build a team and keep it for his family. So,
if you like your World Series winning New York team, you can keep it. Your New York team.
Yeah. So that actually brings up a point. At the time, there were actually rumors that it was a death of convenience, and I don't mean that he was actually euthanized, but I wonder if he actually decided, let's stop the struggle rather than lose 2/3 of what I've built to the government.
I mean, there is some of that, and you hear from the left that, well, our founders didn't want an aristocracy here in the United States, so we shouldn't allow wealth to go from one generation to the next. And I keep thinking of all of the current families that for which that is completely absurd. And, who were they to interrupt the right to private property? Well, and that's really, I think, what it comes down to. They're gold diggers. Not the people who own the property, but the people who want to take it from the family.
Exactly. What they mean is they don't want we, the people, to have the possibility of living in an aristocratic manner, not to actually be aristocrats, because in America you can't actually be one. However, they want to act like aristocrats there in D.C. and Concord and Boston and everywhere else, and tell the rest of us how to live our life as peons on the land that they so graciously allow us to use and imagine is ours.
It's interesting, and I think we've probably covered this topic before, but, when somebody builds something and they become incredibly successful or even moderately successful, they leave that to their children, usually, and the children divide it up. However, the will equates. But normally you would have a relatively equal division of the assets,
and
right?
by the third generation, they're paupers again and starting over.
They could be. Now, some of those people will use the money successfully and continue to develop their own empire, maybe the same one or in a different direction. But that's their choice, right? They get to decide what to do with their inheritance. Liberals, and statistically, have fewer children, right? A lot of them only have one. I mean, if you look at the math, some of them don't have any. But if they only have one, like let's take the Clintons, for example. They're worth billions, thanks to their foundation, foreign donors, speeches they get paid massive amounts of money to, all their political collections. They have one child. If they die, she becomes a multi-billionaire by default, basically.
And she's owned by a Saudi prince somewhere.
And she has access to all the money in the foundation. She has access to all those connections. And she's not diluting that wealth into multiple paths where it can be used in various ways. It's just going to continue to be Clinton money all the way along. That's not very redistributive. I can't even say that.
Redistributive.
That's good.
Yes.
And talking about liberals and disconnects. I mean, they want death taxes.
Redistributive.
That's what I was trying to say. And so I said to Skip, why don't we propose an exorbitant tax on abortions? Because that's a death tax.
It is.
Let's see how the liberals react to that one.
50% of all the money Planned Parenthood makes that day.
Yeah, that's great. But the other disconnect, you talk about Prius driving liberals. They want electricity prices to necessarily skyrocket. So just they can't connect the dots to imagine that's going to make their economical half electric powered car more expensive to drive than a gasoline powered car.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it here.
That's because in reality they want everybody to take the train.
Yeah. We're seeing the high electricity costs here. Now, when I get my bill from formerly PSNH, now Eversource, the first thing I look at is not how much I have to pay. I'm looking at what was this year's electrical use compared to last year. Then I look at the cost of that. And then I finally look at the kilowatt hours. The most esteemed wife actually opened the bill up before I did this time, and she looked at that and she saw the graph. And she said, "Look how little we got," because we also got we got a nice little letter from the customer service centers thanking us for digging out the snow so that the meter reader could actually get to the meter. And she thought she had opened that up first and then looked at the bar graph. She said, "We're using less money now." And I said, "Yeah, and we're paying more money. We're, less energy, more money." And it was 18 cents a kilowatt.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because, you look at the nominal price, and depending on who you're signed up with, your nominal price runs from about 9 to about 13 cents
Not
per
anymore.
No, I said nominal price. The problem is, there's the nominal price, and then there's the price of transporting it to you, and all sorts of layers of costs, and the stranded costs, and all the other stuff. And you're right, your gross cost per kilowatt hour is 18 to 20. but your cost of the actual generated electricity is more like 10 to 12.
Yeah, and here we are all over again. The progressives are about to yank that up higher, especially for the PSNH folks or the Eversource folks, because they have now successfully, with the help of Jeb Bradley, come to an agreement. Actually, it's more like giving in to your neighborhood tough guy. They're going to sell all their power plants now. And, the liberals are very happy because now they will have to pay the spot price on the open market for their energy. We're finally deregulated. Well, PSNH customers right now are paying lower costs because they own the power plants.
Let me explain to those who don't understand this what happens when you pay the spot prices.
You've got 2 minutes.
In California a few years ago, under Governor Gray Davis, who became known as Grayout due to the rolling blackouts and brownouts, signed on to a deregulation bill that had been passed by the crony capitalists in the state legislature. And they were crony capitalists, and it wasn't full deregulation. And there were twists, turns, and hooks in this thing. But the bottom line is that the electricity utilities were hamstrung. And they were paying spot prices for any excess usage. So during the summer peaks, they were bidding for out-of-state sources of electricity to fill the demand, and those suppliers, who also had other demands on their generated power, were charging them something like 5 times the average rate, because that was the market price at the time. That's what happens when you buy on the spot market, when you've waited till the last minute to buy those concert tickets or whatever. And they were paying enormous prices, and they were losing money, and they eventually reached a point where they could not buy that power and had to do without, and then you got the blackouts. And this is the kind of thing you're going to get here. You're either going to see temporary spikes to 50 cents a kilowatt hour, I'm not making this up, it's about the right proportion, or you're going to see rolling blackouts, because one or the other is going to happen. Either the electricity company is allowed to pass through to you that spot price that they have to pay when they didn't negotiate very well, or they're going to shut off the electricity because they can't pay and stay in business.
15 seconds. Comedic gold. Current thing in the political air is that Hillary, what happens to the Democrat bench? Who is the Democrat bench? And I just saw a list over at Red State. Do you know our own Senator Jeanne Shaheen, who might be considered as a presidential candidate from the back bench?
You know what? She's actually a better politician than a lot of them. Isn't that a scary thought?
Well, that is true. She is a better politician, no doubt. All right, this is GrokTALK. We will be right back with Dr. Jeffrey Singer to talk about Obamacare and stimulus-related electronic health records and how they aren't doing what we're promised and how they're actually bad for doctors and for medicine. We will be right back.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jeanne Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jeanne Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jeanne Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jeanne Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the Right to Know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
GrokTALK.